Well, hi folks, welcome to Pete's Kitchen Garden 2018. First video of the year, a little later than I would normally start doing them. I have been busy in the garden, just haven't had time to film really. So, quick introduction to anyone who's just stumbled across this channel. Basically this is where we live. We're fortunate to have a decent sized garden here. These are old houses, I think they were built in the 1940s, and in those days people were lucky enough to have big gardens, so we're blessed here really. This is also south facing as well, so we do get the sun pretty much all day long, to be honest. It gets very warm. It's been absolutely boiling today. It's Saturday the 5th of May. It's what, 6:45 in the evening, and it's been about 24 degrees, 25 degrees, at least 30 in the greenhouse. In fact, it was that warm I had to move my tomato plants out. I was worried that they were going to get scorched. So yeah, it's been beautiful, but I've been out in it all day doing bits and bobs, caught a bit of sun. Basically what we do, we're a family of three. There's me, my wife and my 9-year-old son, and I've been gardening for sort of constantly for the last 4 or 5 years. I've done bits and bobs in the past, but I was lucky enough to sort of inherit this garden just over 10 years ago, and I've spent the last 5 turning it from basically an overgrown wilderness into a functioning garden. It's called Pete's Kitchen Garden, this channel. That's because we do veg is really the backbone. Veg salad is the backbone of everything that we do, really. That's the main thing. But I am also a lover of flowers and plants, and you know, enjoy not really just about having an allotment bolted onto the house, but I like to have some nice colour and a nice family garden, really, where we can eat, entertain, where the kids can play. You know, it's not a contemporary garden with sharp edges. It's not the most necessarily perfectly manicured garden. It has sort of wilder parts, but it's everything that I think a garden should be. Obviously, you know, with gardening, I don't think with any garden you ever get to a point where you say, right, it's finished now. You know, it's not like decorating a room. You know, once it's done, it's done. I think gardens evolve, and you know, every year I try and improve it, do a little bit more, and just become a better gardener. So yeah, I'm going to take you on a little tour and show you the kind of thing that we've got going off here. Now, the one thing I will say just before I stand up and start filming around the garden is I am not a professional cameraman. These are not professional films. I do this for fun, for enjoyment, and hopefully, you know, if anyone can watch this video and get a bit of inspiration or a few tips, then great stuff. But as I say, I'm by no means consider myself an expert. I've learnt a few things over the last few years, but you know, we never stop learning. So I'm going to start with these vegetable beds first. So here, and you can actually see my silhouette in the shot now, which is not fantastic, but this is where we grow. Well, I'm growing potatoes here this year. In past years I've done them in sacks or tubs, apart from the very first year I ever grew them, and I was going to do the same again. But then I thought, well, it's actually a bit cheaper compost-wise to do them in the ground. And this was actually this is a patch of virgin ground. Last year it was just grass and weeds, and I dug it up, covered it over for the winter, killed pretty much everything off, chucked a load of compost in, rotavated it, and as you can see, these potatoes I've actually had to earth them up. They're probably earthed up about as far as they're going to be now. I only planted these 2 weeks ago, so they're doing pretty good. Tend not to plant my potatoes until, well, the back end of April, really, the middle of April. The reason being that by the time they start peeking out like this, I don't want them too big, because if we have any late frost, they won't like it, and it can blacken the leaves. There's still a danger of frost over the next 2 or 3 weeks, although it seems unlikely this weekend with the temperatures that we're expecting. But because they're still small, if we do get a late frost, I can always chuck a bit of fleece on there. So we have a contingency plan. Can't talk. Tulips. I absolutely love tulips. I planted all these last autumn, and the plan is that these will carry on looking great for a couple more weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. They'll start dying off, and by the time it comes to the beginning of June, we'll be getting the summer bedding in there, marigolds, pansies, violas, etc., all that kind of thing. And just here, while we're talking about borders, this is my border with the evergreens, perennials, bulbs, all sorts of bits and bobs in. That sort of changes and evolves every year, and I tend to move things about early in the season yet, so there's not a great deal going off in there, but there's a few beauties that I'll show you along the way. These vegetable beds, you'll see quite a few you know, open areas. I've got nothing growing in here yet. It's still a bit early in the season for some things. This is where my beetroot are certainly going to go, and probably I'll put a couple of other bits and bobs in there. Shallots, which despite the fact that I've been cooking with them for years and gardening for a few years now, I've just never got around to growing any. So this is my first year growing shallots. This bed's full of onions. We use a lot of onions, so I grow a lot. And this store well. This is overwintering garlic. Now, I cannot recommend highly enough overwintering garlic. I overwinter mine every year, get an overwintering variety. I usually plant it around about October, November time, and by sort of early June, although this year, because we're a couple of weeks behind, it may be a little later than that. The winter sort of went on for a few weeks longer than we were expecting. But, you know, everything catches up. And actually this lot I'm really proud of, because I think it's the 4th year I've done overwintering garlic, but these ones I didn't buy from a garden centre. I used cloves from the garlic that we grew last year. So yeah, they didn't cost me anything, and I wasn't sure if it would work or not, and they've come up beautifully. Some more onions. We always have 2 beds of onions. I think it's largely white onions in this bed. White onions, brown onions, and in this one we have got the red onions, which I'm a huge fan of. So it's just before we go down to the other end of the garden. This is our little decking area. I'm just going to walk over to this little section here. Got a few evergreens in this border, and the thing I'm really pleased about is this Acer. I love Acers. A beautiful plant, and I planted this last year. And the thing with Acers, and it depends on the variety, but this one, it likes a bit of sun. It doesn't like too much. It can cope with dappled shade quite nicely. In fact, it sort of prefers those conditions. They do like it fairly warm. They're not a big fan of frost, and they don't like a windy location as a general rule. So this is perfect because it's kind of tucked away in this corner of the garden, and although we are south facing here, because of this fence and this wall and the shed, by about 2-3 o'clock, this little border here for the rest of the day is in shade, and that's the hottest part of the day. So this Acer will get the sun from morning until sort of, as I say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But fortunately the hottest part of the day it's actually sheltered, so it's in a good location. Bit of ericaceous compost went in with that when I planted it, although we don't generally have a problem with, I mean, we can grow things like Pieris quite easily in this garden, which, you know, they say you should use an ericaceous compost, but we do have a clayey soil here in South Yorkshire, so certainly in this garden, other than obviously the vegetable beds that I've worked on and dug up and added compost, but we are growing on clay here, so which tends not to be on the alkaline side really. But yeah, it's very happy. We have this planter on the decking, which is at a bit of a funny in-between stage actually, because these violas here have gone right through the winter, and they've given us spectacular colour. These cosmos here are grown from bulbs. These are flowering beautifully actually, but I think they're starting to come to an end, as are the daffodils behind them. I mean, they finished flowering, I've taken the heads off. But what I will do is, it's important to let the foliage die back on, well, daffodils, tulips and most bulbs, because the energy goes back into the bulb, and they'll actually stay there to grow again next year. When they do die back, we'll have dahlias in there and various other bedding plants, and it's going to look great. And then this frame at the back, now you can't actually see, but behind these daffodils, and I don't know if I can zoom in really, if I can find one, so there we go. This little climber here is Morning Glory, and it has fantastic flowers, and I've planted a few of those around the edge. So the idea is that will actually grow up the this little frame that I've built here and give us a nice little backdrop. So yeah, that's that. 8x6 shed, fairly standard. The felt got ripped off in winter, that needs re-roofing. We have been sat out here today, hence the loungers. This is where I grow my sweet peas. For those of you who are new to gardening, when I say sweet pea, these are not an eating variety, these are sweet peas as in the flowers. And these will grow right up the front of the shed to about this height, and they'll have multicoloured flowers. They look absolutely fantastic. They're great for cutting, pop them in a vase in the house. And I've also sown some poppy seeds in here and some calendulas as well, and I might put some asters in there, so we have quite a bit of height going off there up against the shed. I've got a couple of these little wall baskets, and I usually grow trailing lobelia in there. Well, I say I usually grow, I've just put them up this year, so I will be growing trailing lobelia in those, which should look very nice. I'm just going to show you a few of these the plants in the herbaceous perennial border. So euphorbia there, looking absolutely fantastic. Pieris, I'm a huge fan of. Love the foliage on these. That's Jacob's Ladder, which flowers this time of year, and I think it's absolutely stunning. I love the flowers on that. I don't really have very much else that's blue in the garden, so that's particularly pleasing to see. Again, another variety of Pieris. I think the red of these leaves is absolutely fantastic. I mean, 2 or 3 weeks ago, this red on this plant was almost glowing. It's got an almost sort of iridescent quality. And then we have hostas, other bits and bobs. As I say, there's still quite a lot to come up in this border, because it's still quite early in the season. Just a quick note on the vegetable beds as well. So these 3 here, I've used the no-dig method, and I'll explain to you in a second what that is as I come up here to this bed, because I've used exactly the same method here. And basically what no-dig is you don't dig the soil at the end of the year, you simply rake away any annual weeds. If you've got any perennials in there, you know, anything like bindweed or anything coming through, you probably want to take those out. And you literally just layer compost over the top. You don't dig it in, plant straight into that. Trust me, it works. If you want to find out more about the no-dig method, look for a guy called Charles Dowding, who is the guru on no-dig. And the basic gist of it is that you don't break up the soil structure. You layer organic matter, i.e. compost, on the top, just like nature would do. You're not digging through the soil. And the nutrients from the compost on top eventually do work their way down. Now, I think there's a misconception with a lot of people that you have to dig the feed in because that's where the roots are going to go. And that's not necessarily true. Plants don't really put deep roots down just for food, they do it for moisture. That's the main thing they're after. But what really helps the roots of plants grow is all the natural organisms in the soil, and things like Mycelia bacterium, all these sort of good bacterias that, you know, when you're digging and rotavating in there, you're just breaking them up. And the guy who I'm talking about, Charles Dowding, he actually, as I say, he's pioneered this method. He's got a website, YouTube channel. Just look for Charles Dowding no-dig, and he'll tell you a lot more about it. But he's run experiments with 2 different beds using both methods, and the yields are pretty much exactly the same. There's not much in here at the minute. The sticks are just marking out where everything's going to go. So we've got leeks here, path. I've actually left myself more access this year, because the other good thing with no-dig as well is that you can walk on the compost, you can walk on the beds, and it's a lot more forgiving. It doesn't tend to sink as much, as long as you don't do it all the time or too much, just when necessary. But I've left gaps in here so I can actually get in between there. So leeks, path, carrots, path. My parsnips I've already sown. I've got them under netting for 2 reasons. Firstly, because the birds like to come in here and use it as a bird bath, and the other reason being that we have problems with cats as well. So this will just protect them until they get a bit more mature. Path at the other side, and then I've planted lettuce and spring onion today. So on the right is iceberg, these ones. And these are a lettuce that I love to grow over here called Bijou. and they're like a sort of crinkly, crunchy leaf lettuce, and the combination of these two in a salad is fantastic. And then spring onions in bunches. I always grow spring onions in bunches, 4 or 5 seeds in modules, let them grow together and plant them out just as they are. And then here I've got my peas. Now these are Kelvedon Wonder. Now this is of a variety that actually on the packet it says it doesn't need any supporting because it only grows a foot tall, but it does produce a lot of peas. And we like to pick them when they're small and sweet. We very rarely cook them. We tend to eat them raw, chop them into salads or whatever. But I've built this little frame just in case we get any strong winds. I've built it out of these willow sticks that that actually grow on the trees here in the garden. I chopped these down last year, so you know it's a bit rustic. It's not dead straight, but the peas aren't bothered. So I mentioned earlier about the new potatoes that I was growing in the ground. I am still doing a couple in sacks, mainly because I just had a few left over and I didn't want to waste them, so stuck them in there, and I'm sure they'll do fine. The great thing when you grow them like this, and I'd recommend this particularly for anyone who's got a small garden, is that when these are ready, the foliage will die back. You can chop that off and you can literally put the whole thing in a shed or a cool, dry, dark place, and they'll keep like that for weeks, absolutely weeks. You know, I'm talking, what, 4, 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks in the right conditions, and then you can just take them out the bags as you need them. So it's a really good idea for if you don't want a massive haul of potatoes all at once. And with a family of 3 like we have, we just don't need that many potatoes all in one go. So anything that you can do where you're getting veg from your garden bit by bit, so you know, successional sowing, you know, sow lettuce and then maybe 3-4 weeks later sow some more, or you know, just pick the outer leaves. Anything that you can do to make a crop last longer also means you're going to take up less space in the garden, and you're going to get much more productivity. So yeah, we've got this lovely little archway here, which I've put a couple of hanging baskets on. The plan with this, actually, if I can just walk back a bit, is to grow an evergreen, some sort of flowering evergreen. I'm thinking probably an evergreen clematis or something, just to sort of frame, well, it frames this bottom half of the garden that I'm standing in. It frames it quite nicely. I'm just going to take a walk through here, and I'll just turn around and look up the top end of the garden there. So yeah, that'll be nice when it's got something growing around it. You can just see beyond the bench in the distance, I've got a couple of compost silos. We do our own composting, but what we find is that the waste that we produce, including all this grass, and it's a fair sized lawn that we cut, it just doesn't provide enough compost for the whole garden. So I still end up buying a lot of compost in. But we still do this because, you know, you've got grass clippings and organic waste and various other things. You know, why not chuck them in there? And the other thing I do as well, so with compost, ideally you want a balance of what's called browns and greens. So greens are things like veg peelings, grass, etc. But it's always good to have what we call browns in there as well. So these are things like dried leaves, you know, cardboard, shredded cardboard's a good one. Anything that has carbon in, ash, if you've had a fire, if you've just been burning wood or cardboard, ash is great in there, which is pretty much pure carbon. What you're trying to do is just balance carbon and nitrogen. And what I tend to find is we have more green waste. There's much more greens than there are browns, and it's a problem that a lot of gardeners face. So another thing I do is when I've got spent compost in plant pots, I just empty it into the compost, because it does put a little carbon back in there, but also it sort of opens up the structure a little bit and stops it becoming too claggy. I'll be doing more with those compost bins in a few weeks, but that'll probably be another video. Into the greenhouse, 8x6 greenhouse. Don't really need a bigger greenhouse than that. This seems to do okay. It does get quite full at times, but it does for us. My tomato plants there. I think these are probably the healthiest looking tomato plants I've had at this stage in the year ever. I'm well pleased with these. They only came outside the last couple of days, and I'll be keeping an eye on the weather. I can still got the option of taking them back inside if we do get any of those late frosts that I was talking about when we were looking at the potatoes. But yeah, we've got 2 varieties. We've got what we call a cordon variety, which is a variety that grows up a cane. You pinch the side shoots out, and they're the ones that give you your sort of big, you know, your tomatoes that what they call salad tomatoes, the larger tomatoes, sort of snooker ball size, and these ones here that seem to be shorter are a tumbling tomato, so they're like a bush variety. And I don't know if you would have noticed before, but just on the house there, either side of the door, we've got a couple of hanging baskets, and that's where these will go. We'll plant them in there, they'll tumble down, and we can pick nice cherry tomatoes just by leaning out the door, is the plan. I've still got beetroot here. I always grow my beetroot in clumps as well, so in each of these I sowed sort of 4 or 5 seeds in each module. They'll be ready to go out in a week or so. I'll take them out all in one go and plant them in a clump, so you'll get 4 or 5 beetroot growing together. Now trust me, this works. I've done it a couple of years running now. They don't crowd each other out. You can then, if you want baby beets, if you want sweeter ones, you can pick a few out and leave the others in, or you can pick them all small, or basically they will grow, and they'll grow just as big as they would if you sowed individual ones. So I do find that this is very space efficient, and I just think, like the spring onions, it's another one of those vegetables that grows quite well together when you grow it in bunches. Obviously the traditional way is to grow these, to do a drill and put them 4 inches apart, well 2 inches apart, and then thin them out. I don't do that. This is how I do them. Trust me, it works. Few things I've sown today, some more lettuce and another lot of spring onion, another lot of peas I've put in. There's some spring onion that we've got left over that we didn't pop out today. And then there's the summer bedding plants. So I was talking about the border with the tulips earlier. When they die off, the summer bedding will be going out there. And that's all this kind of stuff. So we've got marigolds, pansies, zinnia, petunias, all manner of things. I can't remember everything now, so I'm not going to try and run through it all. But yeah, we've got all that going on. Now, I'm always going to be honest in these videos. Sometimes things just don't work out and they fail. And looking at these lobelia, they're in a very sorry state. I've always had trouble growing lobelia, and it's one of my favourite bedding plants, so inevitably I always end up going out and buying it. But I love lobelia. It's a tiny little petals, but it's very you can get some really nice colours with them, and they're a really good filler. You can buy them as a trailing variety, you can buy them as an upright variety. Basically, in previous years I've struggled to get them to germinate. This year I managed to get them to germinate. I picked them out in bunches like I saw on Gardener's World, planted them up, and they just look terrible. So I'm going to leave them for now. They might pick up, but I wouldn't be putting any money on that at all. And then I've got some African marigolds here that my mate Roy, my neighbour next door, passed over to me. And some geraniums there, some verbena, and then a dahlia. Now, I took some seeds from the dahlias that we grew last year, saved them over winter, dried them out, sowed them. I got one plant and that's it. But it's one plant, and this will grow and it'll form what's called a tuber, which is kind of like a gnarly bulb, if you like. Yeah, it'll hopefully we'll get it coming back every year. So even though it's only one plant, if I just get 2 or 3 new plants each year, I've already got 2 or 3 that I planted in the little planters on the decking, where I was showing you the trying to get to the climbing plant. There's actually a couple of dahlia tubers in there that hopefully will come up at some point. So yeah, we do like our flowers here. It's not just about the veg, but the veg is definitely the main thing. And that is about it really, folks. So yeah, this is Pete's Kitchen Garden. This is my passion. I'm a musician, that's my other passion, but this is my my non-rock and roll passion, and I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I find it very calming, relaxing. We get fresh food, decent quality food, and it's just great to be out here. So I'm going to put my feet up now, have a few beers, and until next time, thanks for watching, look after yourselves, take care, bye for now.